relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia, no doubt, has major strategic consequences in the Middle East. Joining me now to talk about a Saudi-led pan-Arab army and U.S. policy in the Middle East is former U.S. Ambassador James Jeffrey. During his career, he served as ambassador to Iraq, Turkey, and Albania. He was also the Deputy National Security Advisor under President George W. Bush, with a special focus on Iran. Ambassador, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for having me in.
Good to see you again. So we have this proposal here for the creation of a pan-Arab army, a sort of Middle Eastern NATO, if you like. Can a force of this kind work, or will it be seen as the Sunnis ganging up on the Shiites?
You're absolutely right about that risk, because the states in the Arab League that are associated with Iran, such as Syria, are not participating in this. But it's basically a reaction to both the American movement towards Iran on the nuclear negotiations and Iranian adventurism in places like Yemen, Syria, Bahrain, Iraq, and elsewhere throughout the region. Don't read too much into this as a NATO-like major military force. It is basically a political reaction along with the airstrikes in Yemen. Those are the two major elements in this.
You say political, but if another force is created in the Middle East, could it actually destabilize the Middle East further rather than act as an agent for stability?
There is always the risk of a breakdown between the Sunni and Shia powers in the region and a chaotic region-wide Sunni-Shia sectarian conflict. That's one of the things the United States and our allies and friends are trying to avoid. I think we will be able to avoid that. Iraq is very important in that regard, as is Syria. I think we can contain that. I don't think that this will actually produce a real 40,000 strong military force that is capable of deploying. It took us a long time to stand up NATO, and these people are way behind us in terms of interoperability and coordination with each other. Again, it's the political message that's so important here.
There is already a pan-Arab force of a kind led by Saudi Arabia, which is taking on the Houthis in Yemen right now. How is that working out?
It isn't working out that well if the purpose is to stop the Houthis from taking the port city of Aden in the south, or frankly to stop the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula force to the east, in eastern Yemen, from gaining ground as well, because they are. So now we're seeing ever more a struggle, rather like Syria, between an Iranian-backed Shia offshoot force, the Houthis in Yemen, against Sunni Islamic extremists, particularly Al-Qaeda. And this is very bad for the region.
And just on the fighting taking place in Yemen right now, is there a military solution to this conflict?
There is no real solution to any of these conflicts other than all of the powers in the region, Iran on the one side, the Sunni Arab states on the other, and the United States getting together and coming up with some sort of compromise. That is the situation in Syria, it's the situation in Iraq, and it's now the situation in Yemen. We're seeing a collapse of nation states under the pressure of fraying loyalties from the populations and pan-Islamic movements. And if the states of the region do not band together and find a way to cooperate, this is just going to continue and get worse.
The pan-Arab army was an idea which was proposed by Egypt. It's being championed by Saudi Arabia. If we look at Saudi Arabia, where does it see the main threat coming from in the Middle East? Is it Islamic State? Is it the fighting that's taking place in Yemen from elsewhere?
My experience with the Saudi leadership in the past, particularly then King Abdullah, not so much King Salman, is that their number one fear is Shia Islam, particularly under the aegis of Iran. Secondly, however, they recognize that Al-Qaeda and offshoots such as ISIS, the Islamic State, also pose an existential threat to the Saudi regime and to regimes throughout the region. So they have two enemies that they have to deal with.
We have a situation now where Egypt is very enthusiastically embracing this idea of a pan-Arab army, and we are told that this kind of pan-Arab army is going to be used against non-state actors like the Houthis, like Islamic State, etc. But is there a danger here that it could be used against the political opposition, for instance, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt?
I do not think so. First of all, that's the job of internal security forces primarily. Secondly, again, I do not believe that a real 40,000 strong ground force will ever be stood up. These people are pretty good. We saw this in Libya repeatedly. We're seeing it in Yemen, of putting together their air forces. They do train together. They have been trained with the U.S. Air Force. They fly mainly U.S. or British or French equipment, and that works pretty well. Putting these armies together, and armies, of course, unlike air forces, take serious casualties. That's a totally different question. It's a totally different challenge.
As you point out, this is a political message that Saudi Arabia and its allies are sending to the United States as the United States tries to improve relations with Iran. What would the response of the United States be to that?
I believe, from what the president said when he announced the Iranian agreement, talking about at the same time asking the Saudis and the other Gulf Arab Sunni states to come to Camp David to discuss security in the region, a very rapid support to the Saudis in the Yemen operation, even though we probably, I'm almost sure we have some doubts about striking from the air. The fact that in the end, we engaged in Tikrit and saw that that city was won from ISIS after we insisted that the Iranian-backed Shia militias pull back. These are all signs, and also better cooperation with Turkey on a variety of things, which is pointing towards Syria. These all show that the administration is getting the message. It's got to do more for its friends and allies in the region as it is moving forward on the nuclear agreement with Iran. And that's the logical thing to do.
You've said recently that the U.S. is in free fall in the Middle East. Do you believe that it's time for Middle Eastern governments to take responsibility in a bigger way for their own security?
No, that's one of the reasons we got in free fall in the first place, was that the Obama administration thought that it could lead from behind and that these states could take on the burden themselves. They can't. They're not nation states the way we have nation states in the Far East and the way we have nation states in Europe or even in South and Central America. These states are challenged from all directions, from pan-Islamic movements to local tribal and family considerations. So therefore, it's very, very important for the United States to play an active role. Actually, since I wrote that, and since many other people wrote similar things, the administration has taken a series of steps. I just delineated some of them in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, to try to stem this freefall. Right now, the administration has gained a little bit of relief, and I think that the American Congress in the region is going to see what the administration is going to do next. The administration can pull out of this dive.
Just to get back to that NATO analogy for a moment, and as you pointed out, NATO, there's military cooperation, their weapon systems work with each other. There's also a high level of political integration in NATO, which you would not have in the Middle East. I mean, who would give orders to a pan-Arab army? Would it be resolutions of the Arab League?
No, because we've seen several variants of Arab armies before, largely to fight Israel. That didn't work very well. The GCC has its own force, a Peninsula Shield force that is typically headed indirectly by the Saudis. So when you have any organization that has both the Saudis and the Egyptians, we tend to see a rivalry slowly emerging. And one, for example, that's already present is over Syria and over Russia. The Egyptians, particularly President Sisi, are not as eager to take down the Assad regime as are the Gulf Arab states, and they have a better relationship with Russia, including possible arms deals. So watch that very closely, because another rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Egypt will undercut the sense of solidarity that these people are trying to develop right now.